you'd have to change the character and nature of the show. I mean, if you had Matt and Kitty have an on-screen love affair.
Kitty's loving, I'll be blue.
For 20 whole seasons, Gunsmoke captured the hearts of over 40 million viewers every week. But there was one question that haunted fans more than any showdown at the OK Corral. Why did James Arness never kiss Miss Kitty? The first time they shared a scene together, they had to redo it multiple times because the sparks between them were so intense. It was that good. So why? After all that sizzling tension, we have decided to break down the juicy details and reveal why that kiss scene didn't happen. Care to find out? Watch till the end. Marshall Dillon's character development. So, let's talk about Matt Dillon, the character from Gunsmoke who became such an iconic figure over time. It's wild how much depth was packed into him, especially considering how he started. John Meston, the writer behind the character, initially saw Dillon as just your typical tough lawman, the kind of guy who could take down a criminal without breaking a sweat. But Matt became so much more than that as the show progressed, didn't he? What started off as just a guy who was good with a gun and had a strong sense of justice turned into a complex, deeply layered individual. And what made him stand out was that you could see how much he was affected by the choices he had to make, physically, emotionally, and morally. The man had scars both on his body and in his heart. And you know, that's what made him feel so human. He wasn't just a marshal doing his job. He was a guy who carried the weight of his badge with a quiet strength, always walking that fine line between doing what was right and staying true to his own humanity. But here's an interesting input. He didn't just go out there and throw punches or shoot people left and right. No. Matt Dillon wasn't some trigger-happy cowboy. He was, at his core, a guy who wanted peace. It sounds cliché, but it's true. His character wasn't about glorifying violence. It was about understanding the cost of it. Gunsmoke was full of action, drama, and unforgettable characters. But one mystery left fans scratching their heads for decades. Why didn't Matt Dillon ever kiss Miss Kitty? The answer, revealed by James Arness himself, is more surprising than anyone could have guessed. Was it a matter of respect and artistic choice, or something deeper about their characters? Stay tuned as we uncover the truth behind this on-screen decision and what it reveals about one of TV's most iconic pairings. Dillon grew from the somewhat cynical lawman, who was just trying to survive, into a person who really understood the burden of law enforcement, especially in the rugged, often lawless landscape of Dodge City. It's almost like he realized the more power you have, the more careful you have to be with it, right? You can't just shoot your way out of everything. He became someone who wanted to reason with people first, to find another way before pulling the trigger. His growth as a character wasn't just about how good he was at his job. It was about how he learned to balance it all, his responsibilities, his emotions, his relationships. Speaking of relationships, let's not forget about his connection with Miss Kitty. Their romance was definitely a slow burn, wasn't it? But here's the thing. Matt Dillon's position as a marshal wasn't just some job. It came with huge stakes, and a personal relationship like that? Well, it could have put them both in serious danger. Imagine the amount of pressure that comes with being a lawman, with enemies who could be gunning for you at any moment. And then add the risk of putting your loved one in the crossfire just because of your role. Talk about complicated. So yeah, Matt and Kitty's relationship was subtle, kind of under the radar, but not because they didn't care for each other. It was because Matt had to protect her. His job was so much bigger than any personal connection, and he couldn't afford to have that vulnerability hanging over them. He was the marshal of Dodge City. He had to keep his head cool and his emotions in check, especially when things got dangerous. But here's where it gets interesting, though. Matt Dillon's dedication to his job was seriously something else. It was almost like he had a one-track mind when it came to doing the right thing. He was incorruptible. No matter how tough or morally gray things got, Dillon never let the power go to his head. Now we have to talk about how Matt Dillon started to change, especially when it came to violence. You could see him slowly evolve from that hard-edged lawman into someone who wanted to use his words more than his fists. It was like, with each episode, he got a little softer. Well, not softer in the weak sense, but you know what I mean. He started trying to talk down people before going for his gun. He didn't want to shoot if he didn't have to, but when he did, man, you could see the regret in his eyes. Every time he had to kill, it weighed on him. That's what made him such a fascinating character. Also, we can't forget his loneliness, right? Matt Dillon wasn't some lonely, tortured soul for the sake of drama. His isolation was a direct result of the job he did. Being a marshal meant that Matt had to distance himself from others to protect them, but also to stay objective. He couldn't get too attached to anyone because it might cloud his judgment, especially when it came to making tough calls in life or death situations. That's what made the character so relatable. He wasn't just some idealized, heroic figure. He was a man who had to live with the consequences of his choices every single day. And that solitude? It was a part of his identity. It was necessary for him to stay true to the law, to stay true to his role as a leader. That independence, that quiet sense of purpose, was everything. Miss Kitty's perspective. Miss Kitty Russell was no ordinary woman. She wasn't just a saloon owner in a lawless frontier town. She was a force to be reckoned with, an embodiment of strength, independence, and business savvy, all rolled into one. Running the Long Branch Saloon in Dodge City, she was in the heart of a man's world, and she ruled it. But what did it really take to keep such a place running smoothly, especially when it was the finest saloon in town? It wasn't just beer and whiskey she served. She had champagne, too. Talk about catering to every taste. Even the ice was top-notch, with river ice in the winter and Colorado mountain ice in the summer. Imagine how difficult it must have been to manage all those details while staying true to her own sense of style and purpose. Running such a high-class establishment wasn't for the faint of heart, but Miss Kitty didn't shy away from a challenge. She faced it head-on with a quiet confidence and an ironclad sense of responsibility. But let's talk about the other side of the coin, shall we? The emotional side of things. Because while Miss Kitty was a savvy businesswoman, she also had a heart, and it was firmly entwined with a lawman named Matt Dillon. They never had the traditional romance. But who needs that when there's such a strong, unspoken bond? Think about it. Miss Kitty wasn't one to demand grand gestures or public declarations. She understood the risks that came with loving someone in Matt's line of work. She knew that being Matt's girl could make her a target, but somehow that didn't stop her. She accepted it, even if it hurt sometimes. That episode, The Badge, where she reached her breaking point after seeing Matt's 11th shooting, that was a tough moment for her. Can you imagine the emotional toll? Here she was, running the most successful saloon in the town, but emotionally she was exhausted. She tried to hold on to hope, dreaming of a someday when things would be different. But eventually, even her dreams of change couldn't hold back the weight of her feelings. "My somedays are almost gone," she said. Heart-wrenching, right? She was caught between wanting a life with Matt and knowing that the risks, both to him and to herself, were too great. But here's the thing, Miss Kitty never let her vulnerability overshadow her strength. She wasn't just a woman in love. She was a woman who valued her independence above all else. She had dreams of her own. Dreams that didn't necessarily involve a husband, kids, or settling down. She made that clear from the start. How many women in her time could say that? How many women had the guts to stand firm on their own terms, no matter how much society or others might try to push them into traditional roles? It's not like she didn't care for Matt deeply. She did, more than anyone could really understand. But she was also fiercely devoted to her own path, and that's something that really deserves respect. Even though Miss Kitty kept her personal life private and her emotions in check, there were moments when her love for Matt bled through. Think about when he was unconscious in Doc's office, and she was there holding his hand. How powerful was that moment? It wasn't flashy or dramatic, but it was real. That's what made their relationship so special. It wasn't about grand speeches or romantic gestures. It was about those quiet, intimate moments that spoke volumes. It's easy to assume they were just the classic couple, but their bond ran so much deeper than what anyone could see. And let's not forget the logistical side of things, running a saloon, filming a show, and maintaining a personal life, all while flying back and forth from Phoenix. Miss Kitty didn't just play a part in the Long Branch, she was the Long Branch. 19 years she spent serving up drinks and providing comfort to the folks of Dodge City. And yet, when she felt it was time to step away, she did so with quiet grace. "I was tired and it was time to go," she said. But anyone who knew her would understand that it wasn't just about exhaustion. It was about knowing when her story had reached its natural conclusion. The end of the trail, as she called it. How many of us can say we know when it's time to walk away from something we've poured our heart into for so long? Miss Kitty Russell was a symbol of strength, love, and independence. She showed us that a woman doesn't have to fit into anyone's mold to be successful or fulfilled. She proved that you can be both tough and tender, independent and loving, all while running one of the most prestigious saloons in the Wild West. Now, when you think about it, how many women have that kind of impact in the history of TV? Not many, right? That's what made Miss Kitty so unforgettable. For years, fans of Gunsmoke wondered why Marshal Matt Dillon and Miss Kitty never shared an on-screen kiss. Their chemistry was undeniable, their connection electric, yet the moment audiences longed for never happened. Now, James Arness himself has revealed the surprising reason behind this choice, and it's not what you'd expect. Was it a creative decision, a matter of personal preference, or something else entirely? Stay with us as we uncover the fascinating story behind this iconic TV mystery and why it changed the way fans viewed their relationship forever. Fan theories and speculation. The relationship between Matt Dillon and Miss Kitty on Gunsmoke has always been a magnet for endless speculation, tugging at the hearts and imaginations of devoted viewers for decades. Isn't it fascinating how two characters can create so much buzz just by sharing a few lingering looks, a meaningful exchange, or a subtle touch? Their dynamic wasn't just another storyline. It was a mystery, a puzzle left tantalizingly incomplete. And fans have been trying to piece it together ever since. Did they love each other? Were they just friends with an occasional flirt? Or was there something deeper, something more intimate, hidden just beneath the surface of those perfectly scripted moments? These questions still keep fans debating, dissecting, and dreaming about what might have been. Theories about Matt and Kitty's relationship have been as colorful and varied as the show's memorable cast of characters. Many believe the duo shared a secret, unspoken romantic connection that went far beyond friendship. After all, how could two people share that much chemistry and not have something more going on? Some fans even imagined that Matt and Kitty had tied the knot in secret, keeping their marriage under wraps to protect Kitty from Matt's enemies, a storyline worthy of a Gunsmoke episode itself. Others thought they simply had an unbreakable bond that didn't need labels, choosing instead to remain independent while cherishing the closeness they shared. And let's not forget the theory that their relationship truly blossomed in the quiet hours after closing time at the Long Branch Saloon. Couldn't you just picture them sitting at the bar after everyone had left, sharing their hopes and fears over a glass of whiskey? The fascination didn't stop with casual speculation. It practically flooded the production team. Amanda Blake, the actress who played Miss Kitty, reportedly received 40 to 100 questions every single week about the nature of her character's relationship with Marshal Dillon. Can you imagine sifting through that many letters, all brimming with curiosity and passion? Fans were relentless, pouring their hearts into letters asking if Matt and Kitty would ever confess their feelings or share a real love scene. One fan even wrote, "Every love scene they shared put me on the edge of my seat, hoping it would be more." That sentiment wasn't rare. It echoed throughout countless letters, showing just how deeply invested audiences were in this will they, won't they romance. The show's producers, however, were masters of ambiguity. They knew that keeping Matt and Kitty's relationship undefined worked like a charm. The mystery wasn't just a narrative choice, it was a strategy that kept fans hooked. episode after episode, season after season. James Arness, the actor who brought Marshall Dillon to life, once reflected on the fans' obsession in his autobiography. He mentioned how people constantly asked why Matt and Kitty's romance never went beyond those subtle, tantalizing hints. But that was the magic of it, wasn't it? The unanswered question, the possibility. It kept viewers coming back, hungry for more, dissecting every glance, every word, every shared smile for clues. Even decades after Miss Kitty's final episode aired in 1974, the debates rage on. Fans revisit specific episodes that seem to drop breadcrumbs about the nature of Matt and Kitty's bond. Remember those moments when other characters referred to Kitty as Matt's woman or Matt's girl? Those lines sparked endless conversations, with viewers pointing to them as undeniable proof of a deeper connection. And whenever the show introduced potential romantic rivals, like Matt's old flame Sarah in Season 12, or Kitty's contemplation of leaving Dodge City in Season 15, the fandom went into overdrive. Was Kitty jealous? Was Matt heartbroken? Every interaction between the two was scrutinized with the intensity of a detective examining a crime scene. In the end, maybe the brilliance of Matt and Kitty's relationship lies in its ambiguity. By never giving audiences a definitive answer, the show allowed everyone to craft their own version of the story. Were they star-crossed lovers bound by duty and circumstance? Or were they simply two friends who shared a connection so profound it didn't need to be labeled? Whatever the case, one thing is certain. Their relationship wasn't just a subplot. It was the heart of Gunsmoke. It's what kept fans engaged then, and what keeps them debating even now. Isn't it amazing how some stories, no matter how unfinished, can stay with us forever? James Arness and Amanda Blake had one of television's most beloved partnerships on Gunsmoke, but there was one thing fans always questioned. Why didn't Marshall Dillon ever kiss Miss Kitty? The answer isn't as simple as you might think. Was it a matter of the time period, a behind-the-scenes agreement, or a deliberate choice by the actors? James Arness finally spoke out about this decades-long mystery, and his explanation will leave you stunned. Stick around as we dive into the surprising truth behind this on-screen decision. Memorable, almost kiss moments. Gunsmoke was the kind of show that could keep fans hooked for decades, and one of the biggest reasons for that was the tantalizing will they won't they dynamic between Marshall Matt Dillon and Miss Kitty. Now, imagine being part of an audience that tuned in week after week, watching every little exchange between the two with bated breath, hoping to catch a moment where they'd finally give in to their feelings. It's like the writers knew how to keep people yearning, creating tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Can you imagine the frustration and excitement all rolled into one? Take, for instance, the episode 7 Hours to Dawn. Talk about a close call. In this one, Kitty was convinced Matt was dead, and when she found out he was alive, she rushed into his arms in this emotional whirlwind of relief. The way she threw herself at him, wow, that was enough to make viewers lean in closer to their TVs, squinting at the screen to see if she actually kissed his cheek. Was it a kiss? Or just the way the camera angle played tricks on everyone? Fans debated that moment endlessly. It's one of those scenes that still gets mentioned when people talk about the most memorable, almost romantic moments in TV history. And it didn't stop there. The show was a masterclass in teasing its audience, leaving them to fill in the gaps with their imaginations. But here's something funny. The only confirmed kiss between Matt and Kitty? It didn't even happen in the actual show. Nope, it was during a cigarette commercial in the late 1950s. Can you believe that? Amanda Blake, who played Kitty, kissed James Arness, Marshall Dillon, on the cheek while handing him a carton of L&M cigarettes. A cigarette commercial. Fans, of course, ate it up and probably thought, if they can do that in an ad, why can't we get something like this in the actual episodes? But nope, the show kept them waiting, teasing, and hoping for more. And then there were episodes like P.S. Merry Christmas, which technically gave fans a crumb of what they wanted. There's this one little peck on the cheek. Yes, just a modest one. When Kitty wishes Matt a Merry Christmas, cowboy. Can you imagine how people must have gasped, replaying that moment over and over in their minds? And let's not forget the bullet, where Kitty's fierce loyalty to Matt was on full display. She literally threatened someone's life to protect him. No kisses, no big romantic gestures, just pure, raw emotion that said everything without saying much at all. Isn't it wild how sometimes the absence of something can make it feel even more intense? Or how about Quiet Day in Dodge? Now this one was such a tease. Matt and Kitty share this intimate dinner in her bedroom. Yes, her bedroom. And it felt like finally something might happen. But nope, Matt falls asleep before anything could even develop. Talk about frustration. And then there was Gold Train, the bullet, which delivered one of the most emotionally charged scenes between them. Matt, recovering from a near-fatal injury, wakes up to see Kitty by his side. The way he acknowledges her, the connection they share in that moment, felt so real and intimate that it almost didn't matter there was no physical contact. Almost. What's fascinating is how these moments affected viewers. People became obsessed with the smallest details. Fans wrote letters begging the producers to let Matt and Kitty share more romantic scenes. Some even went as far as cataloging every glance, every touch, every little interaction between the two. Can you imagine someone logging every meaningful look? That's how invested people were in this relationship. And honestly, who could blame them? The tension, the chemistry, it was all so perfectly crafted. It's almost like the show was telling its audience, you don't need grand gestures to feel something deep. And maybe that's what made Gunsmoke so special. The production team had this brilliant way of balancing intimacy and restraint. Sure, it was frustrating, but it worked. The show lasted 635 episodes. Think about that for a second. 635. And those little moments, those almost kisses, were part of the reason why. They kept fans coming back episode after episode, hoping that this time they'd finally get the romantic payoff they'd been waiting for. Did they ever truly get it? Well, that depends on who you ask. But one thing's for sure, the journey was unforgettable. For 2 decades, Gunsmoke fans watched as Matt Dillon and Miss Kitty shared countless moments of unspoken love and understanding. But there was one thing missing, a kiss. Why did James Arness and Amanda Blake never let their characters cross that line? The answer might surprise you. Was it due to the conservative nature of the time? Or was it something far more personal between the actors or the show's creators? Stay tuned, because the real reason James Arness avoided kissing Miss Kitty is a story you'll never forget. The untold story behind the decision. So, if you think about it, the folks behind Gunsmoke, the CBS producers, the network execs, the whole creative team, were playing a really careful game from the very start when it came to Matt Dillon and Kitty's relationship. They weren't just throwing any old romantic tension on screen. Oh no, they had a plan. A strategic, calculated decision was made. It wasn't like Matt and Kitty didn't have chemistry. Anyone who watched could feel that. James Arness and Amanda Blake were absolutely magnetic together, but the producers, despite seeing that undeniable spark, chose to keep things, well, subtle. Almost like a whisper between them rather than a shout. This wasn't some random choice. The producers had a clear vision, and they had a couple of key meetings where they ironed out exactly how this relationship was going to unfold. Or rather, not unfold. Because let's face it, their dynamic wasn't meant to go full-blown romance. Now, it's not like Amanda Blake was sitting there, secretly pining for a love story to blossom, because she'd totally got it. She really understood the bigger picture. In fact, she even spoke about it in a 1960 interview, explaining that she understood why the show didn't push Kitty and Matt into a romantic relationship. That, my friend, was actually part of the charm. It was the mystery of their connection, that delicious tension, the moments that made you wonder, could there be something more? That was the hook, the thing that kept viewers coming back week after week, eager for more of that unspoken bond. Let's talk about the why behind all of this. When the creative team sat down to make decisions about Matt and Kitty's relationship, they decided on a few golden rules that would guide everything. First, Matt had to maintain his image as a devoted lawman. That was non-negotiable. He was the marshal, the Rock of Dodge City, and his character needed to remain that guy, the guy who puts his duty first, above all else. But wait a minute, doesn't that make you wonder? What would have happened if Matt had been tied down by a serious relationship? Would he have been as focused on his role as marshal? Would his character have shifted from that strong, independent man into someone more concerned about romance? The producers definitely thought so, which brings us to their second rule. Matt couldn't get seriously involved with anyone. It was almost like they were saying, "Nope, no time for that." And they knew that if Matt and Kitty were to officially pair up, the show would lose its essence. What made it stand out was that the audience could always wonder, is there something between them? That's what made their relationship interesting, mysterious even. The third rule was key too. Keep things mysterious. Why give the audience all the answers when they could be left on the edge of their seats, wondering if, when, or how the relationship would evolve? It's like when you're reading a book and there's that slow burn between two characters, where every glance, every word exchanged, and every small gesture carries a weight of unspoken possibilities. You get just enough to keep you hooked, but not so much that it spoils the fun or the thrill of wondering what might happen next. That's exactly what they were doing with Matt and Kitty. It wasn't about shoving a relationship in the viewers' faces or spelling everything out. It was about subtlety, about letting the audience feel it, imagine it, and let it linger in their minds long after the episode ended. They weren't just telling a story, they were inviting viewers to be part of it, to fill in the gaps and to invest in the possibility of what might never even be explicitly said. The producers definitely understood the power of keeping the mystery alive, and honestly, they knew they were onto something big. Even James Arness, the man who brought Matt Dillon to life, was on board with this direction. He didn't just agree with it, he understood it. In fact, he even went on record saying that if Matt had been in a serious relationship, it would have changed everything. It would have pulled Matt's focus away from his martial duties. And let's face it, Gunsmoke was all about Matt being that rock-steady, unwavering figure of law and order in a wild, unpredictable town. It's kind of funny though, isn't it? How this calculated decision to keep things this way worked out better than any full-blown romance could have. Sometimes less is more. What do you think? Would the show have had the same magic if Matt and Kitty had just fallen in love and lived happily ever after? Or did the mystery make it all the more exciting? The kind of tension you could feel in your bones without them ever having to say a word. That was the brilliance behind it all, keeping the spark alive without ever fully lighting the fire. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.